My 19F cousin, 28F, gave birth to a baby boy 4 months ago. For 2 months, she's been dumping my nephew at our house to babysit him because she needs a job as soon as she can start working again. Next week I have to go on a 5-day trip to a city where I'm starting university in a few weeks to set up my room in my friend's apartment. It's new, and I already called people from the internet provider we'll be using to help set up the router and TV. I'll be alone for the whole duration of my stay, and the city is 6 hours away so nobody can help me out. My mother asked me this morning to babysit my nephew next Tuesday. I'd already be in the city because my cousin has 2 job interviews. I asked the mandatory, am I really the only person who can look after him? And to my shock, no. Turns out my older sister, my cousin's husband, and her in-laws are all available. I laughed in her face and told her no way in hell am I doing that, and she started screaming at me for being an ungrateful and irresponsible brat. I snapped and told her I don't care to look after someone else's kid and that I have better things to do than babysit a 4-month-old whose own dad is available to care for him. My mother then argued it's his only day off and her in-laws are conservative and think the father shouldn't be bathing a kid or changing his diaper and I should be compassionate because of that. I just told her I don't give a crap and that's not my business. She later tried asking nicely for me to move my trip and I snapped again, saying I don't care for them enough to do that. Am I the idiot? Edit. People told me he's actually my second cousin, not nephew, so thank you for correcting me. Also to add, this isn't the first time I've been asked to sacrifice something for that family. To explain why I snapped almost immediately. So your mom thinks being conservative means a husband and father can screw right off and a random teenage cousin should cancel plans to watch a kid that isn't theirs? Gross, stand your ground. Not the idiot. Husband is conservative as in conserving his energy. Right, Lumfao. Lazy idiot. Like sir, that is your kid. If they are conservative, then as a grandmother, it is Mill and your mother's duty to help her raise that child. A mother's job is never done. Their views, not mine. Not the idiot. I'm curious to what your mother's arguments are against your sister, your mother, or your cousin's Mill watching that child. My sister is bipolar and in a depression episode, which I understand. She avoided saying why the in-laws can't. My mom can't because she works as a doctor and has long hours. To me it sounds like there are still enough adults who could look after the children. It is also very unconservative that your cousin's husband doesn't provide enough so the cousin didn't have to work and didn't need the interviews. In turn, he needs to be unconservative enough to parent his child. It seems likely that your mother is volunteering for you these duties more so than the masking despite having other people who can watch the kid. Actually, you just pointed it out to me. I enrolled in a university for architecture in a sexist country. I don't and never wanted kids and I look unconventional. My extended family always filled my parents' heads with how I should have been taught conservative values, even though my parents aren't conservative. They might be trying to get me to like kids enough to have my own one day. Background? I, 35M, my wife, 34F, and our 2 kids, 3 and 5, live in a VHCOL very high cost of living city. I made about 5x as much as my wife, so we do pretty well. If my income were the same as my wife's, we would not be able to afford to live in our city. My job is pretty low stress, about 35-ish hours a week with the only requirement that I will be on call for 1 week out each month. Normally nothing ever happens, so I do my usual routine with the understanding with my wife that if I am needed, I will drop whatever we are doing and work until the work issue is resolved. This only ever happens once every quarter and only lasts a few hours. My wife on the other hand has a much more stressful job. Her boss is incredibly demanding and often demands random and inane things just as a power play with her subordinates. She usually works about 45-50 hours a week. As a result, I take care of most home stuff, drop off, pick up kids from daycare, cook meals, and generally keep the house clean. The incident? It was an on-call week after work hours when my wife got a text from her boss about fulfilling an emergency request for a client. My wife complained to me that this request really could wait until tomorrow, but she would rather get it done so she doesn't have to listen to her boss at her in the morning if it's not done. I had no problem with it, but I reminded her that I am on call so I might need to switch with her if something came up. She made a grunt of acknowledgement, but nothing beyond that. About 2 hours later I get an all-hands call to immediately come into the office. Normally I can resolve issues remotely, but we had an issue that prevented us from remoting in. I rush upstairs and told my wife I had to leave only for her to turn around and say, "Sorry, but my issue came up first. You are going to have to tell your work you can't." I was taken aback and told her that no, this issue isn't something I can skip for anything short of I am physically in the hospital and can't come in. She got increasingly angry and started ranting at me, but I told her that I didn't have time for this and that I am leaving. When I get back we can discuss this. She started crying, but I had no more time, so I left for the office. On the way she called me to continue the argument, and in the heat of the moment, I said, "Look, I respect that you put a lot of time and energy into your work, but we cannot afford our house or lifestyle without my job, so when push comes to shove, my job has to come first, otherwise we are going to be on the streets." She hung up on me after that. When I got home about 3 hours later, around 11 p.m., the kids were crashed out on the living room couch with several bowls of cereal spilled around them. I went upstairs and my wife was locked in the bedroom and refused to talk. In the morning I found out from the kids that she spent the night crying in her room and didn't feed them dinner or tuck them in, so they made cereal and had a sleepover in the living room. Not the idiot, and her neglecting to feed your children should be a red flag. You're absolutely not the idiot in this situation. Her behavior with the kids was horrible. She must change her job and attitude. Not the idiot. Your wife, however, needs to talk to a therapist. Her reaction is not normal, nor is it healthy. She should also look for a new job, as her current job is clearly interfering with not just her life but her emotional state. She knew you were on call. This was a known, prearranged agreement. Her suddenly going back on it and also neglecting your children is not healthy. What if one of the kids choked on the cereal? What if one of them slammed their head into something which gave them a concussion? Not caring for the children is a serious issue and a sign of a much larger problem. My brother, 20, got a car for his 18th birthday. Not a new car or anything. It was a 20-year-old Lexus that was in pretty good shape. And he rubbed it in my face for the rest of the time he was in his senior year of high school. Compared with my brother, I get just as good of grades as he does. Better in some cases even. I worked my hardest in the hope of fairness. I even did some volunteering to clean up garbage in my local area. Then my 18th birthday came and went a few weeks ago. And the only thing I wanted, the only thing I was hoping for, was a car. I wasn't expecting something like a new car or a sporty car. Just something reliable like my brother got. The party wasn't anything like my brother's 18th. For his 18th, my mom baked the cake herself. It was a delicious layered chocolate pudding cake. I got a sheet cake from the supermarket. For his, they got a DJ. For mine, it was my dad's old boombox with a couple of mixed CDs. We went through the whole party, and I figured my parents might have just been waiting to spring a surprise gift on me. But that didn't happen. I asked them as things were wrapping up why there was no car when my brother got one. And they said that they felt like he'd worked harder for it. I asked what he did that I didn't do. Because I did all of that and more. My grandma was nearby and heard everything. And then she asked them why as well. She ended up lecturing my parents that she was very disappointed in them for showing favoritism. Then she proceeded to announce to everyone still there that my parents thought it fine to get their firstborn son a car and DJ, but not their second. And then she even pointed out how much harder my parents tried for my brother's 18th birthday than they had for mine. My uncle was the first to stand up and say something. Then everyone else who'd not left yet. I ended up just walking away and going to my room to sit and think. I got a few I'm sorry calls from relatives. And my grandparents convinced me to go out with them for the evening. But when I got back, my parents were pissed and told me I'd shamed them to the whole family. I just walked past them because I didn't want to fight. The next few weeks went by with the silent treatment between us. But then a few days ago, my parents suddenly surprised me with a white '98 Subaru Legacy that runs great. They practically threw the keys and the title in an envelope at me and said to have fun. I got the car. And they're paying for insurance for the next 6 months as they did for my brother. I know a car isn't really a right, but a privilege. So I feel like I've essentially blackmailed my parents into getting me one. Am I the idiot for how all this played out? Update. I would like to clarify a few things. My parents make pretty good money. And also don't go out of their way to live lavishly by choice. They've always been moderate in everything they buy or do. Though if anything is stretching their finances, it's my brother's college tuition. He got a partial scholarship and my parents are paying the rest. I don't and never intended to ask for the same treatment on that. I want to work and pay for my own student loans. Now that I have the car, I'm already looking into getting a part-time job. This also isn't a gender thing as I'm male like my brother. The bill of sale for the car I got says my parents paid $1,600 for it. My brother's car cost them about $3,000 if I remember. But I don't see it as a money issue. I actually really love the Subaru. And told my parents so. They did not share my enthusiasm. I also did try to talk about a car with my parents a few times last year. But they always dodged the conversations about the topic. I figured if I talked about it too much, it'd ruin it. And so I stopped. I would have felt like a brat to keep talking about getting an imaginary car. So I learned to just stay silent and hope. I can't go stay with my grandparents because they live in a one-bedroom condo. There isn't enough room for other people. After all their kids grew up, my grandparents decided to downsize to make their eventual retirement easier. Also, my grandparents know all of the details already. And they tell me that I didn't do anything wrong. And we're already planning on confronting my parents quietly over the car issue. But they took the chance to take care of the matter when they heard me asking my parents about it. As for my brother's 18th birthday party, it was held in 2020 during basically the height of the pandemic. Honestly, we shouldn't have had a big party like that at the time. But my parents insisted. As for my brother himself, he barely speaks to me, even before he left for college. He didn't show up for my 18th birthday party. And I figured that's just because he's busy with college and he's not even in the same state as us anymore. Honestly, I haven't seen or heard from him since Christmas. And even then the most I got out of him was a mild greeting. I did thank my parents for the car. Enthusiastically thanked them even. But they've barely said a word to me after giving me the Subaru. And when I thanked my parents, they brushed me off and just went inside. It kind of gave off the vibe that they were letting a brat play with his new toy. Which was pretty upsetting. And one of the reasons I made this post. Update 2. There was one more thing I forgot to say. I was really hoping to get the car because I literally couldn't get a part-time job without one. We don't live in the city. And we're 10 miles from the nearest public bus stop. I've always had to get rides to go anywhere. Now that I have the Subaru, I intend to look for a part-time after-school job as soon as I can. Update 3. Since it came up in so many messages. I want to clarify that when I went to talk to my parents after the party, it wasn't in front of the rest of the family. I intentionally spoke with them in another room and was supposed to be out of earshot of everyone else there. But my grandma eavesdropped and then barged in to start lecturing my parents about their actions. And that's what caused the crap storm to start. Not the idiot. The way they got called out by the whole family is hilarious. They're mad they got caught. Good on you, op. Not the idiot, clearly favoritism here. When I was in high school my parents helped my older sister get her license at 16 and gave her a car to use, and they did the same thing with my younger brother. This is bad because I had middle child syndrome hard and I had better grades than them, played 2 sports a year, worked 15-20 hours a week, and was going full-time to a local community college through a program we had, so basically graduating with my associates at 18, and they didn't. This was over 10 years ago, and I still get upset with the favoritism. Your parents are mad at you even though they have just caused lifelong resentment. Not the idiot, you didn't shame them, you just pointed out how horrendous they were behaving. It's not like you did a public announcement, your conversation was overheard. Their embarrassment was because it was true and everyone knows it. They all probably saw the difference and all were too polite to say anything until you mentioned it.